Hello class. Today we're going to be talking about school shootings and how they're affected by race from a sociological perspective. So we're going to be talking about the implications of it, the resulting social issues that come about from it, and what maybe we can do as a society to start to limit this problem. So let's get into it. So let's have a brief overview of school shootings in the United States. So gun violence at schools has been steadily increasing on average since the 1970s. In fact, it's up 50% from the 1970s. Most people, when they think of school shootings and gun violence, they think of mass shootings, but this isn't usually actually the case. School shootings have been shown by research and documentation to be most often a result of a dispute between two students that's escalated to the point where one of them feels the need to bring a gun to school. So not one person shooting many, but usually one person shooting one. School shootings also tend to be heavily covered in our media, which perhaps leads to the increased prevalence of it and the increased knowledge of it. Comparatively, they're very visible to the other kinds of gun crime that happen in our country. So with that said, let's look at the kind of person who tends to commit a school shooting. Let's look at the profile of a school shooter. Let's look at the type of person who tends to commit gun violence in a school. School shooters, when separated by sociological categories, tend to fall into a very specific profile. For example, school shooters are overwhelmingly male. Over 95% of them, statistically, are men. The likeliest age of a school shooter is 16. The risk factor for being a school shooter rises towards that age, and then after you hit 16, it begins to fall. School shooters are also typically white. 62% of them, in fact, are white. So now that we know the type of person who tends to commit school shootings, let's look at some of the things that happen as a result of school shootings. So let's look at the personal costs of school shootings. School shootings are extremely traumatic events for those who witness them. They cause disparate mental effects such as PTSD, depression, and a range of behavioral disorders. And some of these conditions can be lifelong. This is not just a temporary effect of school shootings. These kind of conditions can affect people for the rest of their lives. Studies have also shown that students who witness a school shooting have lower average test scores and life performances, even years after witnessing the event. This is another lifelong effect of school shootings that affect people personally. And then finally, an estimated 230 people have actually lost their lives in school shootings since the year 2000. Um, this is only 1% of the overall gun violence that happens in the United States, but I think because it affects our students and our young people, I think that puts it on some of the same footing as some of the more common forms of gun violence in the United States. But gun violence doesn't just affect people on a personal level, it also affects all of us on a societal one. Always after an incident of gun violence at a school, you'll see in the media or on social media people discussing the already present social issues that can lead to school shootings. You'll see people discussing things like gun control reform, bullying, and what's acceptable in a public school for behavior or what's not acceptable. And I think that all of these things are very important for us to talk about. I think this is talking about it is how we can move forward and start to see how we can solve these kind of problems in our society. Moving forward, what should be done? What can we do to limit the amount of gun violence that's happening in our schools? So the motives and causes behind school shootings are disparate and complex. There is no one simple answer that's going to solve school shootings for us. But by looking at the sociological characteristics of the people who tend to commit gun violence at schools, and by identifying the risk factors, we can start to see some of the solutions to it. Mediation between students who have had conflict has shown to reduce the likelihood of further conflict. As I noted earlier on in my presentation, escalating conflict between two students is the leading cause of school shootings happening in the United States. Another way that we could limit the amount of school shootings that are happening is encouraging a welcoming climate at schools and managing aggression and bullying behaviors. By preventing these conflicts before they can even happen, we can limit them ever escalating in the first place, and we can prevent that from happening. Another way that we can do this is reducing young people's access to firearms by preventing them from ever getting hold of a gun in the first place, either through increased gun control or increased education of parents about how dangerous it is for their kids to have access to firearms. This is another way that we can limit school shootings from happening in America. If we put all of these solutions into place, hopefully we can begin to prevent gun violence from happening in our schools, and we can progress and we can solve this problem as a society and move forward. Thank you all for listening to my presentation.